Welcome to the Purple LitNerd podcast for April the 28th, 2018. I am your host, the amazingly adorable Rebecca Thistle, podcasting to you live-ish from my kitchen/dining room table in my apartment, which I call Jeffrey Thistlework. Yes. Oh, I'm so tired right now. But it's LitNerd Day, so let's do this. Okay, so this month we've been talking about Shakespeare's sonnets. Yay! Shakespeare always makes me happy. Anyways, and so last week we talked about the Fair Youth sonnets, which are sonnets 1 to 126. So 127 to the last one, which I think is 154. If I'm not mistaken. I don't have my notes. I'm sorry. These last sonnets, they're what are known as the Dark Lady sonnets. So, why are they called the Dark Lady sonnets? They're called the Dark Lady sonnets because the focus, I guess you could say, of these sonnets, the subject of the sonnets is a lady. And it's sort of unclear about why she's referred to as, well, I mean, it's not necessarily unclear. It's just there's a lot of speculation about the Dark Lady herself. And some people say that it's called the Dark Lady because she has darker features. There's some speculation that Shakespeare might have had a mistress at some point who was from Africa, from somewhere in Africa, and so she had darker skin. Some people like to say, oh no, she was just a brunette as opposed to a blonde, and so that's why she's the Dark Lady. But I think more to the point is that these sonnets are much more erotic and sexually explicit. Shakespeare, in the sonnets, expresses repeatedly this love-hate relationship he has with this woman. Where on one hand she repulses him, and on the other hand, he can't stay away from her. So, and like I said, they're a lot more erotic and sexually explicit, so it's a little more darker content. It's kind of fun to read the Dark Lady sonnets because they, there's a little bit of a storyline with them. The Dark Lady at some point has an affair with the Fair Youth, and so there's that. And so Shakespeare's probably regretting the first 17 sonnets where he said, hey, go out there and make babies. And so the one thing I want to kind of make clear is, even though the sonnets are numbered, we don't actually know when they were written. So when you read the sonnets, yes, there's a sort of storyline to the sonnets, in the Fair Youth cycle as well as in the Dark Lady cycle. But for all you know, this is for all anyone knows, really. They weren't necessarily written sequentially. It's not, the one happened first and two, etc., 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 all the way down to 154. So, that's fun. But I love the Dark Lady sonnets. Excuse me, I'm sorry. It is April in Texas, in West Central Texas, which means that my allergies are acting up, so I got a little phlegmy action going on in my throat. So I'm going to try and make sure and keep that away from the microphone as much as possible, but I'm sorry, it's a really good microphone. Anyways, so Dark Lady Sonnets. Yes, so that's why they're called the Dark Lady Sonnets. She could have possibly been of African descent in some way, shape, or form. But more likely than not, because the sonnets do describe her having darker hair and darker eyes, and she's sort of the anti-Petrarchian object. Like, and earlier this month I mentioned very briefly Petrarch and his sonnets, which focused on a woman who had very fair features and blonde hair and blue eyes, and she was a very fair woman, and so, but that became sort of this like pinnacle of what a woman about whom you write a sonnet should look like. And as opposed to now we've got Shakespeare, who basically has the total antithesis of this Petrarchian ideal. And I love that. Like, my favorite sonnet, I mentioned in the very first show from this month, is actually 141, but I think my second favorite sonnet is 130, which begins, "My mistress's eyes are nothing like the sun." And goes on. I tried to memorize it. I swear I tried to memorize it, and my brain is just not having it this week. Just not having it, and I'm, I don't know if I've mentioned this in the show. I record this podcast through my Spreaker app on my iPad, and I'm kind of afraid that if I minimize the app, that it'll stop recording. So I can't minimize it and open Safari and, find it. So, sorry. One of these days, maybe I'll get a, proper computer. Not that I don't like my iPad. I don't want to, talk smack. But I think it'd be a little bit easier to do this via computer. But for now, this is what I got to work with. So that's what I'm working with. Anyways, Sonnet 130 is really cool because he basically spends 12 lines. It's it kind of goes against, the typical sonnet format, his format, where he breaks his own rules, where, the first 8 lines sort of set it up, and there's a shift in the 9th line, and you sort of sum it all up in that last quatrain, and then the last 2 lines. But in Sonnet 130, he basically spends 12 lines saying, my mistress looks nothing like the Petrarchian ideal, and she's kind of gross. But then he ends it with, saying, and yet I am not going to quote this very correctly, but it's something to the effect of, and yet I know that my mistress is rare, and something about false compare, that she is just, yes, she's disgusting, yes, she doesn't look like the quote-unquote ideal woman, but she's awesome. And that's good job. See, shit like that is why I fucking love Big Willie Shakespeare. I'm just saying. Shit like that is what makes me go, oh, I want to, fondle your brain. I know you're dead. That's creepy to say to an alive person, but it's even creepier to say that about a dead person. So, but yeah, so that's basically what the Dark Lady is. And so, as with, the fair youth, what a lot of Shakespearean scholars and fans and crazy people like me, like to do, basically LitNerds. What we like to do is we like to speculate, who could these poems be written about? And the fact is there's a lot of speculation and no fucking proof. I'm sorry. The most likely candidate that I came across is a woman named Amelia Lanier, maiden name Johnson. And she was the first woman in England to publish poetry under her own name. I know, like, that is so shameful and so terrifying, but she was very smart. She's obviously aristocratic. She grew up in a courtly atmosphere, so she got a lot of good education. She's a very smart woman. She's a very strong woman. And they married her off to some guy named Lanier. And then as I was doing this research, because when you research anything about Shakespeare, just kind of sort of side note, you're always going to come across people going, oh, no, William Shakespeare didn't actually write any of his plays or poems or anything. William Shakespeare was too stupid to do that. I'll get to that in a minute. But one of the videos I came across on YouTube about Amelia Lanier, I don't know. I keep wanting to say Lanier because I'm pompous like that. I'm like, it's a French name. It ends in IER, so obviously it's got to be Lanier. But most of the videos that I watched on the subject matter pronounced it Lanier. And I'm like, no, or Lanier. I'm just like, no, let's be pompous and French and Lanier. Anyways, but back to this video, said that it's very likely that Amelia would have written, maybe not all, but some of Shakespeare's works. Specifically, this scholar was postulating that she wrote a hefty part of Taming of the Shrew, and possibly part of Othello. And I mean, he made a really good case, but I just sat there going, no, dude. I couldn't even finish the video, because it's like, no. And it's not because I don't think that was possible, but and it's not that I don't think that she could have had a hand in that, but I don't think she would have actually written it. But there's some other candidates that were wives of people known or supposedly known to have affiliated with Shakespeare. Elizabeth Wriothesley. If that name sounds familiar, it's because I mentioned in a previous podcast from earlier this month the dedication of the first edition of the Sonnets was dedicated to a WH, and there's some speculation that it could have been the inverted initials of Henry Wriothesley, who was known to have been a patron of Shakespeare.